The HOA president actually yelled that my lawfully purchased cabin belonged to her son as his inheritance. What she didn't realize was that I had already uncovered an 1873 land grant proving my ownership of half the valley, and that her family had been trespassing for half a century. Picture this. I'm out there cutting away the rotted boards from my beautiful 150-year-old cabin when out steps Delilah Thornwick, mid-50s, blonde streaks, face redder than a boiled lobster. Out! You're destroying Bradley's birthright, she screamed. I turned off the chainsaw. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by her ragged breaths and the smell of fresh-cut pine drifting between us. Ma'am, I said I bought this place fair and square. She actually laughed. The county auction doesn't erase 100 years of family heritage. Poor Delilah. She had no clue that one old document in the basement would soon destroy everything she thought she owned. So tell me, what would you do if some entitled neighbor tried to claim your property? Drop your location below. Bet your town's got similar horror stories. But let me rewind a bit. I'm Marcus Holloway, 45, and 6 months ago my life fell apart in spectacular fashion. My 20-year marriage ended. I had to sell our suburban dream home just to afford divorce lawyers who billed more per hour than I earned in a day. But here is the funny thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes it is exactly where you rediscover your footing. My grandfather, God rest his soul, always told me, Marcus, if you work with your hands, you'll never go hungry. He taught me carpentry at 12, showed me how to read the lines in the wood like sacred text. When he passed, he left me his tools and $37,000 with a note. Build something that matters. So there I was, one sleepless night at 2 a.m., scrolling through county auction listings when I found her. A stunning 1873 log cabin on 15 acres in Millbrook Valley. Population 847. A place where old money glared across the fence at new McMansions. The pictures showed aged chestnut logs and a stone foundation, clearly neglected but full of potential. During the preview, the scent of centuries-old timber hit me. These weren't just logs, they were hand-hewn beams, thick as my torso. Fitted with care and craftsmanship you can't find anymore. Running my calloused fingers over that rough wood, I felt something I hadn't in years possibility. Auction day was glorious chaos.
Nice.
My $47,000 bid outlasted some preppy kid in a BMW, frantically texting what I assumed was his mother for more cash. Clean title, verified deed, deal sealed. And that's when Hurricane Delilah entered my life. On day 3 of renovations, while replacing the porch boards, a spotless white Escalade rolled up my gravel driveway like it owned the place. Out stepped perfection, designer jeans, manicured nails, blonde highlights, and an expression that said she'd just smelled something foul. "Excuse me," she said, voice like honey over broken glass. "I'm Delilah Thornwick, president of the Millbrook Estates Homeowners Association. My husband, Dean Thornwick, owns Thornwick Construction. Perhaps you've heard of us." Ah, local royalty. That explained the attitude. I brushed sawdust off my flannel. "Marcus Holloway, what can I do for you?" Her smile was razor-sharp. "Well, Marcus, this property has complications. It's always been understood that this land was reserved for the Thornwick family. My son Bradley had an understanding with Mr. Henderson." "What kind of understanding?" I asked. "A gentleman's agreement," she replied. "Bradley was meant to inherit this property. It's been in our family's circle for generations. Our family," she said it like announcing a title. I pulled out my deed. "According to county records, Ma'am Henderson died without heirs. That's why it went to auction." The mask slipped. Her smile vanished. "That auction was premature," she said icily. "This property belongs with people who understand its significance, people who uphold community standards." The way she eyed my work boots made my skin crawl. I'd heard that tone before from bosses explaining why men like me never made it past middle management. "Look," I said, "I get that you're disappointed, but I bought this fair and square. I'm not leaving." She tapped something on her phone. "We'll see about that," she muttered, heels clicking angrily on my stone walkway as she turned toward her SUV. Before getting in, she looked back with a smug grin. "Mr. Holloway, you clearly don't understand how Millbrook Valley works. We have standards here. Learn them quickly, or you'll find permits very hard to come by." Her Escalade roared off, throwing dust over everything. The smell of her expensive perfume lingered in the air, mixing with the hum of distant lawnmowers. I should have realized then, Delilah Thornwick wasn't just mad about a lost property. She was declaring war on someone she thought was beneath her. Big mistake. I've been fighting uphill battles my whole life. And she wasn't kidding about those permits. As people trickled out, I caught bits of conversation that were unexpectedly in my favor. Bob Kettering stopped by my chair, the familiar scent of motor oil from his hardware store clinging to his shirt. "Hell of a show," he muttered. "I'd been waiting years for someone to stand up to that woman. You ever need backup? I'm in." Then Martha Caldwell, the retired schoolteacher with a rebellious twinkle in her eye, added, "Count me in too, Marcus? About time someone put her in her place." Outside. The October air bit at my lungs as Delilah cornered me beside my truck, her breath puffing out in angry white clouds. "You think you're clever," she hissed, "but you don't know who you're dealing with. My family built this community. We know every commissioner, every legislator, every business owner that matters. Must be nice having connections," I said, climbing into my truck. "Too bad none of them can rewrite property boundaries." Driving home through the crisp night air, the faint scent of wood smoke in the distance, I felt like David fresh off felling Goliath. That sense of victory lasted all of 12 hours. By 6 the next morning, the hum of heavy machinery shook me awake, followed by the water pressure in my cabin dropping to the strength of a dying garden hose. I stumbled outside in my work boots and bathrobe to find a Thornwick construction crew repairing the main water line along my property line. Dean Thornwick himself stood there in a spotless hard hat, directing the operation like a general at war, only this battle was over a pipe that had worked perfectly fine yesterday. "Morning, Marcus," he called out, voice dripping with phony cheer. "Sorry about the early start. Emergency water main repair. Should be back to normal by, Friday." How convenient, just long enough to stall my renovation work. Funny how these emergencies always seem to happen right on my property line, I said. Watching his crew move with the rehearsed precision of people who'd done this exact routine before, Dean just shrugged, his hard hat gleaming in the sunlight. "Old infrastructure, Marcus. Things break unexpectedly." By noon, I'd lost 3 supplier accounts faster than a politician drops campaign promises. Bob's Hardware still had my back, but the lumberyard electrical supplier and plumbing distributor all called with eerily similar excuses. "Sorry, Marcus. We're having delivery issues in your area." Delivery issues. In a town of 847 where you can stand on Main Street and see the county line, that afternoon, my insurance agent showed up looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, maybe in a dentist's chair with a rusty drill. "Marcus," he began uneasily, "we've received anonymous reports of safety violations, fire hazards, structural issues, environmental concerns. What specific violations?" I asked. He scrolled nervously through his tablet. "Open burn piles too close to structures, unapproved electrical work, foundation alterations without engineering clearance. We'll have to send an inspector. Until then, your policies. Suspended. Meaning if my cabin went up in flames, I'd be the one footing the bill. How convenient." That evening, I installed security cameras around the property, cheap motion sensor units from Bob's store. I was still testing the night vision when my phone rang from an unknown number. "Marcus, Chief Rita Gonzalez. We need to talk." 30 minutes later, Chief Gonzalez sat at my kitchen table, politely declining coffee. She looked like a woman who'd seen too many small-town messes, mid-40s, uniform crisp, eyes tired. "I'll be straight with you," she said, the smell of her patrol car's diesel exhaust still clinging to her jacket. "I'm being pressured to investigate you noise complaints, environmental violations, suspicious activity." "What kind of suspicious activity?" She sighed. "Reports are vague on purpose. But I've been wearing this badge 15 years, and I know organized harassment when I see it." She leaned in, voice low. "Document everything, times, dates, witnesses, and watch your back." When she left, I sat on my porch listening to crickets and the distant hum of overpriced air conditioners cooling overpriced homes. Honeysuckle sweetened the breeze, but underneath it I could still smell diesel and my own anger. That's when I noticed the slow-moving car. Once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th pass, I was ready, phone camera in hand. Bradley Thornwick's BMW crept by at 5 miles per hour, his interior light on, so I could see him snapping photos like some budget private investigator. The kid had all the stealth of a parade float. Friday morning, my water pressure finally returned, along with a business card tucked under my windshield wiper like a smug little love note. Thornwick Construction. We buy properties fast. Cash offers available. The sheer audacity of it made me laugh out loud. As I was photographing the card for evidence, Bob Kettering's pickup rumbled up my driveway. He climbed out holding a thermos that smelled like heaven and wore an expression like someone had just kicked his dog. "We need to talk," he said, voice tight as a wound-up spring. Inside, Bob poured coffee with trembling hands. "Dean Thornwick came by my store yesterday," he said quietly. "Made it real clear my business depends on maintaining good community relationships. If I keep helping you, he's cutting off my supplier credit. Bob, don't have to like hell. I don't." His voice rose, steadying like an engine warming up. "I've been in this town 30 years, Marcus. I'm not about to be bullied by some trust fund brat and his lunatic wife." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Besides, I found something you need to see. Inside were photocopies of building permits, 5 years worth, all Thornwick construction projects. Every single one approved faster than a speeding ticket." "Notice the approval dates?" Bob asked. Each permit carried the same signature. Frank Morrison, the same inspector who de-cited me for violations. Same man, same stamp. Same rigged system. Sweet Jesus, I whispered. They've bought the whole damn county. Saturday morning, I was in the basement fixing a sagging floor beam when my crowbar slipped and struck what should have been solid stone. Instead of the usual dull think, I heard a hollow echo, the kind that makes your stomach flip. I pried the loose rock free and found a small cavity, about the size of a shoebox. Inside was a leather-wrapped bundle that looked like it had seen daylight since Lincoln was splitting rails. Hands trembling, I carried it upstairs. The leather was cracked but strong, tied with rawhide that felt like history itself. It smelled of old paper, oil, and secrets buried for 150 years. When I unwrapped it, my knees nearly gave out. On top was a territorial land grant, dated September 15, 1873, bearing the red wax seal of the territorial governor, still perfectly intact. The parchment was thick as cardboard and looked as legitimate as a Supreme Court decree. But it was the name on that document that made me sink to the floor. It's granted to Ezekiel Holloway and his heirs, forever. Holloway my name, my bloodline. Holy hell. The land description was written in that grand, overly poetic 19th century legal dialect where it takes 20 words to say what any sane person could express in 5. Still, the meaning was unmistakable. It began at the Great Oak by the bend in the creek and stretched 50 acres north to the ridgeline, granting timber, mineral, and water rights for all eternity. 50 acres. Not the 15 I'd purchased at auction, 50. And those 50 acres included nearly the entire valley floor, the same ground where Delilah's prized McMansion kingdom now sat fat and smug, like a tick on a dog's back. The second paper was a hand-drawn map, the kind made by someone who truly knew how to survey land. And according to this beauty, the Thornwick family's ancestral estate sat smack dab in the center of property that once belonged to my great-great-grandfather. Poetic justice, served cold. The third document was a letter written in fading ink, but perfectly legible. To my descendants, should any man dispute our rightful claim to this land, present these documents to the territorial authority. This grant supersedes all lesser claims and cannot be diminished by later ordinances or settlement. Old Ezekiel Holloway, a paranoid, brilliant old fox, spread the papers across my kitchen table like a general plotting an invasion. The implications hit me like a freight train made of pure dynamite. Delilah's family had indeed just been trespassing for 50 years. They'd have been squatting on Holloway land for a century and a half. Every house they built, every lot they sold, every tax they collected, all of it sat on property that legally belonged to me. But what really made my pulse race were the mineral rights. The grant included them, and I'd heard the whispers. Talk of natural gas pockets, even traces of rare earth minerals deep under these hills. If those rumors held water, I wasn't just staring at family land. I was looking at generational wealth, the kind that would make the Thornwick Empire look like a lemonade stand on a hot day. My fingers shook so badly I could barely dial Eleanor. "Get over here," I said, "and bring someone who can authenticate historical documents." What did you find? In the nuclear option. An hour later, Eleanor was in my kitchen with Dr. Patricia Morse from the State Historical Society. Dr. Morse examined the papers like a surgeon testing the ink, the paper fibers, even scraping a microsample of the wax seal. Preliminary verdict? Eleanor asked, her excitement barely disguised. Dr. Morse looked up, eyes shining like neon. These appear genuine. If confirmed, this territorial grant would override any modern title or claim. Eleanor's grin could have powered the county grid. Marcus, she said, you don't just own this cabin, you own half of Millbrook Valley. Checkmate, Delilah. By Sunday morning, my kitchen looked like a military command post that would have made General Patton weep. Eleanor arrived first, briefcase in hand, wearing the expression of a predator that just realized the opposing team was made of minnows. Dr. Morse followed with a portable authentication kit that looked straight out of a James Bond movie. Priority 1, Eleanor said, spreading legal pads like battle maps, official verification, full title research, and geological assessment. We're not just defending property rights anymore. We're uncovering a fraudulent empire. Moments later, Bob Kettering walked in carrying coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. Figured you could use reinforcements, he said, setting down the thermos. Martha Caldwell followed, armed with a folder thick as a phone book. Been digging into your family history, she said, eyes gleaming. Ezekiel Holloway, Civil War vet, territorial surveyor, and paranoid enough to hide documents that outlasted the apocalypse. Oh, and I found his original surveyor notes at the county museum. She grinned. Want to guess what they mention? Mineral deposits. The kitchen erupted into organized chaos. Papers rustling, phones ringing, and the occasional sweet mother of pearl. When someone found another smoking gun, Dr. Morse worked with scientific precision, photographing each document under specialized lights. Paper composition matches 1870s territorial stock perfectly, she said. Ink shows proper oxidation. And this wax seal, genuine period material, embedded with official fibers from the territorial office. I mentally noted every word. My divorce had taught me one iron rule. Original documents beat copies in court. That lesson was about to pay off big. Eleanor was already knee-deep in her legal network. Patricia, I need full county land records back to 1870. Yes, I know it's Sunday, because my client just found the legal equivalent of striking oil. While the professionals coordinated, I called Chief Gonzalez. She answered before the second ring like she'd been expecting me. Chief, it's Marcus. I've uncovered something you're going to want to see. What kind of something? The kind that explains why certain people are desperate to get me off this land. An hour later, she was at my table, reviewing Bob's evidence of permit fraud. Her jaw clenched tighter with every page. The only sound in the room was paper turning, punctuated by her increasingly colorful language. This isn't incompetence, she said finally. This is systematic misconduct. Morrison's been fast-tracking Thornwick projects while sabotaging everyone else. If we can prove coordination, we're talking federal conspiracy charges. Years in corporate hell had taught me something useful. Pattern evidence wins. One incident is bad luck. 8 identical ones? That's conspiracy. By noon, we had a full-scale battle plan straight out of a legal thriller. Phase 1. Eleanor files a quiet title action to formally define my property lines. Phase 2. Dr. Morse fast-tracks document authentication through the state archives. Phase 3. Chief Gonzalez opens a corruption probe with federal oversight. But the stroke of genius came from Martha, whose teacher instincts clearly doubled as tactical brilliance. We need publicity, she said, phone already in hand. My former student Sarah Chen works at the regional paper. She's been itching for a corruption expose. Martha's eyes sparkled. How about an exclusive on a 150-year-old land grant that could collapse an entire luxury development built on stolen ground? By late afternoon, my driveway looked like a press conference waiting to happen. A land surveyor showed up, weathered hat, dusty boots, the whole cinematic look. A geological consultant followed, taking core samples and mumbling about significant mineral potential. Then came an environmental lawyer who confirmed that my territorial water rights trumped any modern municipal restrictions. Every expert echoed the same truth. If these papers were genuine, I didn't just own a cabin. I owned most of Millbrook Valley and everything beneath it. That night over cartons of Chinese takeout, Eleanor outlined the official roadmap. Phase 1. Establish ownership through quiet title, 2 weeks max. Phase 2. Document the harassment pattern and file federal civil rights claims alongside Gonzalez's investigation. Phase 3. Negotiate from absolute power. I set down my chopsticks, heart thudding, and the thorn wicks. Eleanor's smile gleamed like a blade. Let's just say, Marcus, they about to learn what it feels like to lose everything they never truly owned. Phase 3, Eleanor said, eyes gleaming, is where we give them a choice. Either negotiate fair compensation for a century and a half of illegal occupation, or stand before a federal judge and explain why they've been running a coordinated conspiracy to violate constitutional property rights. Bob lifted his beer toward the ceiling. To David and Goliath he toasted. Except this time, David's packing lawyers' evidence and mineral rights worth more than Goliath's entire fortune, as everyone filtered out. I lingered on the porch, breathing in the cool evening air tinged with honeysuckle and the faint, intoxicating scent of victory. Tomorrow, we'd stop playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. Monday, the counterattack. The next morning began with the satisfying hum of payback, immediately followed by Delilah's meltdown, which made a toddler's tantrum look like a TED Talk. I was sipping coffee over survey maps when the deep growl of diesel engines broke the quiet. Out on my access road, a Thornwick construction crew had returned, this time with a backhoe big enough to dig to China. They weren't repairing anything. They were tearing it apart. Road maintenance, Dean Thornwick called, his pristine hard hat gleaming in the sun like a badge of corporate privilege. This access road fails to meet current safety standards. I watched as his crew destroyed perfectly good gravel that had held firm since Ulysses S. Grant was in office, carving trenches deep enough to hide a small car. The stench of diesel and churned soil blended with my rising fury, an unmistakable aroma of economic warfare. Funny timing, I said, already recording on my phone. Day after I filed paperwork proving I own half this valley. Dean's grin was colder than a morgue freezer. Pure coincidence, he replied smoothly. We'll have it fixed, maybe in a couple of weeks. Weather permitting. 2 hours later, my septic system erupted like a geyser. The emergency plumber, one of the few brave souls not afraid of Thornwick retaliation, arrived, cursed in 3 languages, and emerged with a handful of filthy rags. Someone stuffed your clean-out full, he said grimly. This wasn't an accident. The damage? $4,000? The message? We can make your life miserable in ways you haven't even imagined. A bureaucratic blitzkrieg by afternoon, the harassment parade began. An environmental inspector showed up looking for chemical spills. Then came the fire department, citing potential structural hazards. After that, the county health department, checking for sanitation issues. Even an agriculture official dropped by to investigate unlicensed livestock. Operations. I didn't own any livestock unless raccoons raiding my trash counted. Every inspector had the same story, vague anonymous complaints, perfect timing, and disappointment when they found nothing wrong. The rhythmic scratch of clipboards became the soundtrack of bureaucratic warfare. When the 6th one left empty-handed, I called Eleanor. This is coordinated, she said flatly. They're hitting you with regulatory carpet bombs, hoping something sticks, or that you'll cave and sell. They picked the wrong target, I said. She chuckled. I've been watching you, Marcus. You've got the kind of stubborn streak that gets monuments built. Tuesday, escalation. That night, while I grilled a burger and tried pretending my life wasn't under siege, I caught movement along the tree-like. The security cameras confirmed it, 3 figures in dark clothing creeping through my woods like clumsy wannabe ninjas. I grabbed my brightest flashlight and made sure half the county could hear me coming. Evening, folks, I called. Beautiful night for a felony trespass, isn't it? The sound that followed, branches cracking, bodies stumbling, was pure chaos. In their panic, they dropped their gear, spray paint cans, a bag of sugar clearly meant for my gas tank, and a high-end camera with a telephoto lens that probably cost more than my truck. But the real prize? Bradley Thornwick's wallet, complete with driver's license, credit cards, and a country club membership I couldn't even pronounce. I laughed out loud. Amateur hour, I muttered, pocketing evidence that would make Chief Gonzalez's day. The bribe by Tuesday morning, I knew the next play was coming, and sure enough, It arrived, wrapped in Italian leather. Dean Thornwick showed up wearing his Sunday best, carrying a briefcase that screamed bride money. "Marcus," he said smoothly, taking a seat like he owned the place. "Let's be reasonable, men. You've made your point. You're a fighter. We respect that." He flipped open the case with dramatic flair, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills. The smell of old leather and desperation filled the room. $200,000, he said. "Cash, you walk away quietly. Start fresh somewhere else. No hard feelings." I stared at the money. It was enough to buy a nice house, a new truck, maybe even a fresh start far from this madness. For 10 whole seconds, I let the fantasy tempt me. Then I remembered the 8 families they'd bullied off their land before me. "Generous offer," I said carefully. "What makes you think this place is worth that much?" Dean's confident grin flickered. "Just trying to avoid unnecessary conflict." I tapped record on my phone. "Dean, if this cabin and 15 acres were only worth $47,000 at auction, why are you offering me 200 grand to disappear?" The blood drained from his face. "I don't know what you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting," I said evenly. "I'm asking. You already know about the land grant and the mineral rights, don't you?" He slammed the briefcase shut, the sound echoing like a coffin lid closing. "You're making a catastrophic mistake, Holloway. My family has friends at every level of government. We can make your life very difficult." "Funny thing about threats," I said, walking him to the door. "They lose their punch when you're recording them for federal investigators." As Dean's truck rumbled away down the mangled stretch of road they accidentally destroyed, I stood there in the fading light, breathing in the night air. It tasted like victory with just the right hint of danger. Phase 2 was about to get beautifully chaotic. Wednesday, psychological warfare. By dawn, things had escalated to psychological tactics that would have made Sun Tzu take notes. I opened my door and froze. Dead animals scattered across my porch in a grotesque display. 3 rabbits, a possum, and what looked heartbreakingly like someone's missing cat. Each one arranged with surgical precision, as if their killers wanted to send a message loud and clear. We re-unhinged, and proud of it. The smell hit me first, rot mixed with damp morning air, and the faint scent of human sweat on the bodies. My coffee instantly turned to ash in my mouth. But here's the thing about bullies. They always overplay their hand. These geniuses had left tire tracks in my garden's soft soil, crisp as fingerprints. The tread pattern? A perfect match to Bradley Thornwick's BMW. Criminal masterminds, they were not. I called Chief Gonzalez immediately. "Chief, it's Marcus. You'll want to see this. It's going to make your morning very interesting." 20 minutes later, she was on my porch, camera in hand, jaw tight enough to bend steel. "Jesus Christ, Marcus," she muttered. "They've moved on to animal cruelty and psychological terrorism." "Gets better," I said, pointing to the garden. "Check the tire tracks." She documented everything with the calm precision of someone building a federal case. "This crosses into felony territory," she said finally. "Harassment, intimidation, likely a conspiracy. How soon before we can act?" "Soon," she replied. Small-town corruption mixed with civil rights violations, that's their specialty. A call from the past that afternoon. My phone rang a number I hadn't seen in 6 months. Jennifer, my ex-wife. We hadn't spoken since the divorce was finalized, and she'd moved to Phoenix with her yoga instructor boyfriend. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling under a thin layer of composure. "I just got the strangest call. A woman named Delilah said, 'You're involved in criminal activity. She wants to reopen the divorce and have you declared mentally unstable.'" My blood pressure spiked like a rocket launch. She called my office, talked to my assistant, even mentioned my new address, she said, panic seeping through every word. "Marcus, how did she get that information?" I'm scared. It hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. They were targeting my ex-wife 3 states away. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was interstate stalking, federal crime territory. "Jennifer, write everything down," I said quickly. Times, dates, her exact words, and call the Phoenix police. There was a pause. 8. "What the hell have you gotten yourself into?" "I bought a cabin," I said dryly. "Apparently that's a felony in Millbrook Valley." After she hung up, I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the walls that suddenly felt less like home and more like a bullseye. Dust motes drifted through the late afternoon sunlight like fragments of my thoughts, scattered and unsettled. The fire started that evening. I was outside grilling dinner when I caught a scent that didn't belong, gasoline riding on the wind. My security feed confirmed it. A figure in dark clothing creeping around my workshop, carrying a gas can and rags. Arson. They were actually going to try burning me out. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, then stepped onto the porch with my brightest flashlight. "I can see you," I shouted. "Fire department's already on the way." The figure froze, then bolted, dropping the gas can. My cameras caught everything. The face, the movement, the build. Even through the darkness and baseball cap, I knew that swagger. Bradley Thornwick was having the worst week of his life. Minutes later, the volunteer fire department roared up, followed by Chief Gonzalez and 2 state police investigators who looked like they'd just walked off a crime drama set. The scene glowed under floodlights and yellow tape. Chaos dressed as justice. "Attempted arson," Gonzalez said grimly, examining the gas can. "And the fingerprints on this will make someone's life very complicated." A sharp-eyed detective, Sarah Mills, watched my camera footage on her tablet. "Clear intent, clear ID, and clear federal jurisdiction," she said. "We've got enough to issue arrests." "How many charges are we talking about?" I asked. She ticked them off on her fingers. Conspiracy to violate civil rights, harassment, stalking, attempted arson, animal cruelty, destruction of property. She looked up, eyes shining. "Your local bullies just upgraded to federal criminals." Justice served that night. I sat on my porch, beer in hand, watching the evening news. There it was, Bradley Thornwick's perp walk. Live on television. Handcuffs glinting under police lights. Delilah screaming about family legacy while her precious son was loaded into a cruiser like yesterday's trash. The local reporter, young, sharp, and ambitious, stood in front of the Thornwick mansion, delivering her lines with the rhythm of poetry. What began as a property dispute has erupted into a federal investigation involving corruption, conspiracy, and attempted arson. My phone buzzed. Text from Eleanor. "Federal judge just signed the restraining order. No Thornwick family member allowed within 500 yards of your property. Game over." I raised my beer to the stars and took a long breath, air that finally smelled like freedom instead of diesel, sweat, and threats. Thursday, the reckoning the next evening. The Millbrook Valley Community Center was bursting at the seams for an emergency town hall. It felt less like a meeting and more like a prize fight. 300 people crammed into a space meant for half that, the crowd electric with tension and anticipation. Regional media teams jockeyed for position. State reps arrived in sleek black sedans, all doing damage control. Deputies guarded the doors. The air smelled of burnt coffee, nervous sweat, and the charged ozone scent that comes right before a thunderstorm, the political kind. Delilah sat in the front row, looking a decade older overnight, flanked by lawyers so expensive they probably billed by the heartbeat. Her once polished Fockaday had cracked, revealing something raw and dangerous underneath. "Ladies and gentlemen," began County Commissioner Williams. He looked like he'd rather be at the dentist without anesthesia. "We're here to discuss recent developments regarding property disputes in our community." Recent developments, as in her son's federal arrest. Before he could finish, Delilah shot to her feet. "This is a disgrace," she shouted. "My family has been the backbone of this community for generations, and now we being persecuted by some drifter who bought stolen property." The room erupted, buzzing like an angry hive. I rose from my seat in the back. Every head turned toward me as if a spotlight had found its mark. "Stolen property," I repeated, walking down the center aisle with Eleanor at my side. Both of us carrying briefcases loaded with enough legal firepower to flatten a city block. "That's a fascinating choice of words." "This is highly irregular," one of Delilah's attorneys snapped. This meeting wasn't convened to debate property rights. Before he could continue, Judge Patricia Harrison, who, driven down from the state capitol for this spectacle, adjusted her glasses with the quiet authority of someone who seen every kind of courtroom drama imaginable. "Actually," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "considering the federal investigation and criminal charges filed yesterday, I think we should hear what Mr. Holloway has to say." Eleanor opened her briefcase with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen," she began smoothly, "we'd like to introduce evidence that sheds significant new light on this matter. From the case, she withdrew the authenticated 1873 territorial land grant, holding it up like a sacred relic. The room went dead silent, the only sound the rapid-fire clicking of cameras. "This," she continued, "is the original territorial grant for 50 acres in Millbrook Valley, issued to Ezekiel Holloway, the great-great-grandfather of my client, Mr. Marcus Holloway. It conveys mineral, timber, and water rights in perpetuity." The silence deepened until even the dust settling on the windowsills seemed loud. Dr. Morse stepped forward, carrying her verification equipment. "The State Historical Society has authenticated these documents," she said. "Paper composition, ink analysis, and wax seal all confirm a genuine 1870s Jura territorial document." "That's impossible," Delilah whispered, but in the hush of the room, her disbelief sounded like a confession. Eleanor smiled with the calm satisfaction of a prosecutor about to deliver the final blow. "According to this grant, the Thornwick family has been illegally occupying Holloway land for over a century. Every house in your development, every parcel you've sold, every tax you've collected, all of it sits on property that legally belongs to the Holloway family." The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, residents talking over one another, while Delilah's lawyers whispered frantic damage control that was a century too late. Furthermore, Eleanor continued over the noise. "Geological surveys commissioned by Mr. Holloway confirmed the presence of natural gas and potential rare earth deposits. We're talking about tens of millions in mineral value." That's when Delilah completely unraveled. "This is fraud," she screamed, pointing at me like I'd insulted her ancestors. "He's a con artist. My family built this community." "Your family," I said quietly, but my voice carried over the chaos, "built this community on stolen land. And when I showed up with proof of ownership, you tried to ruin my life, bribe officials, and commit arson to cover it up." Chief Gonzalez stepped forward, holding a thick folder. "Mrs. Thornwick," she announced, "the FBI has opened a federal case into conspiracy, corruption, and civil rights violations. Your son Bradley has been charged with attempted arson, and there are warrants for your husband's arrest on bribery and misconduct." The judge slammed her gavel, its sound echoing like thunder. "Order, Mrs. Thornwick. You and your counsel need to understand this land grant predates all modern claims. Mr. Holloway is the lawful owner of the disputed property." Delilah collapsed into her chair, deflated, her family's century-long empire crumbling with her. "In addition," Judge Harrison went on, "given the documented harassment and intimidation, I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. No member of the Thornwick family may come within 500 yards of Mr. Holloway or his property." As the crowd dispersed, buzzing with disbelief and vindication, I stood there breathing air that finally smelled like justice served with a side of revenge. Half a year later, I stood on the newly restored porch of my cabin, watching sunlight spill across the meadow where Delilah's gaudy McMansion development once stood. In its place, the first annual Millbrook Valley Heritage Festival. The Thornwicks had taken plea deals that felt like poetry. Dean got 2 years for corruption and conspiracy. Bradley received probation and 500 hours of community service, helping restore historical properties. Delilah faced federal civil rights charges and agreed to sell off their construction company to compensate the 8 families they'd de-driven out. But the real triumph wasn't legal. It was human. Millbrook Valley was healing. Martha Caldwell had organized the festival with the passion of someone who'd waited a lifetime to celebrate authentic history instead of manicured HOA myths. The air was alive with bluegrass music, laughter, and the smoky sweetness of Bob Kettering's barbecue, which I swear smelled like redemption itself. "Not bad for a guy who just wanted to fix up a cabin," Eleanor said, joining me on the porch, handing me one of 2 sweating bottles of beer. She'd become more than my lawyer. She was family now. So were Bob, Martha, and Chief Gonzalez, or rather, Sheriff Gonzalez. After the corruption probe cleaned house, the cabin, restored to perfection, stood as living proof of what persistence could build and what greed could never destroy. The mineral rights lease had brought in over $12 million, enough to turn the place into a museum-quality restoration, complete with modern comforts Ezekiel Holloway himself would be admired. Every beam told a story, Every nail, every board, every stone breathed history and victory. You know what the best part is?
I.
I asked Eleanor, watching families wander through the new heritage center we'd built inside the old barn. She smiled. What's that? Those kids out there, I said, nodding toward them. They're learning real history. Not some polished country club version, but the story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The Heritage Center had become a regional landmark, attracting visitors from 3 states eager to see authentic 1870s craftsmanship and learn about the territorial settlement era. Its programs funded scholarships for local students studying trades, history, or law, because every town needs people who can build things and protect what's right. Sarah Chen, the journalist who'd debroken the corruption story, had moved to Millbrook Valley permanently. Inspired by both the tale and, as rumor had it, the storyteller. She was now working on a book about small-town corruption and the power of ordinary citizens to fight back. Down in the crowd, Bob waved a spatula like a maestro's baton. Marcus, get down here and tell these folks how you found those papers. I laughed, stepping off the porch as the wooden steps creaked beneath my boots, that familiar sound of home and history. The festival-goers gathered around, their faces bright with curiosity, drawn by the universal love of a good David and Goliath story. Well, I began, settling into the rhythm of a tale I'd told 100 times, but never grown tired of. Sometimes when you're just trying to fix a sagging floor, you end up changing everything. As I spoke about the legal battles and the federal investigation that followed, I saw the audience's faces light up with something more than curiosity, recognition. The realization that ordinary people can still stand up to broken systems and win. These weren't just feel-good stories for entertainment. They were blueprints for resistance, survival guides for anyone facing their own uphill fight against corruption. The late afternoon sun filtered through the old oak trees, the same ones Ezekiel Holloway might have climbed as a boy, scattering shifting patterns of gold and shadow across land that had finally found its way back home. The scent of barbecue smoke mingled with honeysuckle and laughter, carried on a breeze that once held only tension and fear. By evening, when the last visitor had drifted away and the festival cleanup was done, I sat on my porch beside Sarah. Fireflies flickered above the meadow, tiny lanterns dancing in the warm twilight. Any regrets? She asked quietly, her fingers intertwining with mine. I thought about it, the endless court hearings, the sleepless nights, the threats that had aged me faster than time should allow. But then my eyes wandered to the cabin, fully restored, glowing softly in the dusk, and I remembered the families who found justice, the neighbors who found hope, and the century-old documents that had waited for the right Holloway to bring them to light. Not one, I said finally. Sometimes doing what's right is the only thing that lets you sleep at night. I smiled, leaned back, and watched the fireflies drift like sparks from a long-forgotten forge. So, I added with a chuckle, if you've got your own HOA horror story, share it in the comments because bullies only win when decent people stay silent. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real stories about ordinary folks who refused to back down when corruption came knocking. I took a sip of my beer, listening to the quiet hum of the night. Trust me, I said, half to Sarah, half to the stars. There are plenty more where that came from.